Hello, welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I am Big Italy 42, joined by Josh Shepardson at BChad50, and we're talking about tonight's slate of action on FanDuel starting at 7:05 p.m., and there are a couple weather concerns. So first, I'm going to introduce Josh, ask him how he's doing, and then I'm going to talk about some weather. How's it going, Josh?
Good. How about you, Justin?
Not bad. I'm not loving these thunderstorms and all this nonsense going on today with the weather, but other than that, I mean, can't complain. Got a nice rainy day in Ohio. It's nice and cold. I can't complain.
Typical Ohio weather, right?
Yeah, pretty much 360 days out of the year. This is what we get. But either way, going to give you a couple weather concerns real quick. Baltimore hosting the Red Sox today. Looks like starting at 7 p.m., there's about a 40% chance of rain, and it increases up to about 70% going into 11 o'clock. So that game not looking great, but I'm obviously not a meteorologist. I'm just telling you what we see here in the morning. Obviously monitor these situations. We'll proceed as if all games are going to be played until we hear differently right now. Coors Field actually right around a 40 to 60% chance of rain from 7 o'clock all the way until midnight, so definitely some concern there. The Dodgers at the Padres looks like around a 10% at 7 o'clock, going all the way up to 50% at 11 o'clock, then tapering back down towards midnight. So some concerns, yes, but not necessarily any that I think a game will be canceled. But Baltimore probably the one that looks the worst because the rain increases throughout the night. So that's my stab at meteorology, reading someone else's information here. So monitor that situation. Check out Twitter. I'm sure you'll find a lot of great information. Or find one of us on Twitter. I'll let you know the latest that I've seen as well.
Definitely.
With that being said, we're moving on here to pitcher, where you and I are agreeing on our favorite pitcher for tonight, and it is not Adam Wainwright. Despite being in a great matchup, he just hasn't not shown the strikeout upside. Under 20% strikeout rate last year. I mean, he was still a very good pitcher, but not a guy I want to pay $9,600 for tonight.
No, and I think people are going to be heavily owning him when they see the betting line. So, especially in GPPs, if you're looking to separate yourself from the field, Waino is going to be heavily owned. Grab our top pitcher, Brandon McCarthy, and roll with him. And I'm rolling with him in both GPPs and cash games. The price is conducive to owning him in both, and I'm not swaying very far from my top pitching option. There is one other name that you and I are in agreement on that we'll probably get some shares of, but I mean, it's going to be McCarthy on probably 80% of my FanDuel teams at least.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. I mean, he's got a nice strikeout rate this year. He's keeping the ball on the ground as he does. So a lot of things going in his favor today. And I mean, is being opposed by Ian Kennedy, but first came off an injury. We know Kennedy has the struggles with the long ball at times. So I like to think that McCarthy will probably get some run support as well. But yeah, I mean, that price discount, everything just as high, if not a higher upside than Wainwright. It's an easy play for me tonight. I'm with you on McCarthy. Elsewhere, the guy that you had mentioned is James Paxton. He's $6,400, a great price on FanDuel tonight against Minnesota, who's just absolutely terrible. Paxton did get rocked in his last start, but I like his upside here. We know how terrible this Minnesota lineup has been. Obviously, he's not going to do what Felix Fernandez did to them last night, which was just brutal. I mean, it just wasn't even fair. We knew it was coming, but those poor guys. I mean, their confidence has got to be riding real low this morning.
And I mean, you have to like a lefty against Joe Mauer. I mean, if you're he's literally their best bat, and the fact that you can neutralize him with the lefty to some extent is a plus. Again, this isn't going to be King Felix 2.0 tonight, but at 6,400, how can you not like Paxton? He's keeping the ball on the ground, and the most important thing, he's not walking people. Like, that is the biggest issue with James Paxton throughout his minor league career. It's the reason that thought he might get moved to the bullpen eventually, but he's not walking people. He's keeping the ball on the ground. He's keeping the ball in the strike zone. He does have the type of stuff that can lead to more strikeouts than we've seen from him so far. Big hammer curveball I like, so I do like Paxton. He's going to be that other 20% owned pitcher to go with my 80% owned McCarthy on FanDuel tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one other guy that I'll consider for some tournaments, Shelby Miller has pitched pretty well. He's $8,400, so he's expensive. I think some people will be scared off of him, but he hasn't pitched particularly deep into games, hasn't gone past 6 innings yet. But, I mean, we all know that Phillies lineup. You've said it before. They're a step up from a AAA lineup, and, I mean, that's a very small step as well. So,
yeah, I mean, and he's got the power arsenal. I do like that pick. It really just comes down to price point, which is nice for GPPs because 8,400 is going to turn some people. He should be under owned. But in cash games, I'm definitely going to be rolling McCarthy. But yeah, for GPPs, there's enough hitting value to be able to squeeze an $8,400 Shelby Miller in there just to get yourself that differentiation that you look for in the GPP. So I do like the Miller call. That's a good one.
Absolutely. Moving on here to catcher, where your top option is Buster Posey. He's $4,000. He's in Coors Field. He's against Jorge De La Rosa, who struggles against righties. Pretty much a no-brainer top option there, right?
Yeah, and to be honest, this is the type of scenario where I am going to pay at catcher. I mean, Posey's got a lefty. He's got him in a ballpark that's not AT&T Park. In fact, it's the exact opposite of AT&T Park. I mean, it's Coors Field. You're not going to get better scenarios and better variables than that. And catcher stinks. It especially stinks tonight. I think the gap between Posey and the rest makes it 100% worth using Posey very heavily and skimping maybe someplace else. A lot of nights I won't use Posey because the price just isn't worth it. But tonight it's 100% worth it. Spend the $4,000 and get a lot of shares of Posey.
Yeah. There's a ton of value, like you mentioned. It's pretty easy. If you are going to go cheaper, we were talking before the show, either AJ Przinsky or Christian Bethancourt, whichever one's in the lineup, should be batting right around 6th in the order. If you need a punt, that's a fine way to go. Yasmani Grandal is only 2,400. He's a nice alternative as well. And only one other guy I want to mention, and you don't love the spot necessarily, but if Yadier Molina can't play, Tony Cruz is min salary. He'll probably be batting 8th if you have to get a punt, but I don't think you're going to need to. We'll mention some other cheap guys, but there's just a ton of ways you can get anyone into your lineup tonight. Yeah,
starting with these, our favorite pitcher is only 7,800. So, yeah. I mean, there's definitely money to be spent elsewhere.
Absolutely. Moving on here to first base, where there's a lot of great options. You've got Justin Morneau at home, granted against a ground ball pitcher, but his price really cheap considering he's at Coors Field at $3,600. Freddie Freeman's the guy I know that you like at $3,300 against David Buchanan. And Albert Pujols at $3,100 against Colby Lewis. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can go. You can go down to Matt Adams at $2,900 against a guy who struggles against lefties. What's your pick here? If you're going to go, give me your favorite play, a little bit cheaper of a play.
I like Justin Morneau as my favorite play. I'll take the park factors. I'll take the lefty-righty matchup. That plays well. My second favorite option is Freeman. And then beyond that, I'm looking at a couple boom or bust types that I can clump together because they are the same player, essentially. Chris Davis and Pedro Alvarez, both left-handed batters, both strike out a lot, both can walk a lot, but both have top-shelf power, and both are playing in ballparks where left-handed power is amplified at Camden Yards and at Chase Field. So I like both. I kind of like Alvarez a lot against Ruby De La Rosa. I think he might be under-owned tonight. And he gets to escape PNC Park for once and gets that righty matchup that you're looking for at Chase Field. So I do like Alvarez quite a bit to the 2,900.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, like you said, great power, nice upgraded park factor there. And I know one other cheap guy you had mentioned here is Mike Napoli against the lefty there at $2,600. Great price tag. Guy who really hasn't got his power going yet this year. No home runs. He does have a double. He does have a triple. But at $2,600, massive upside with Mike Napoli in this matchup. So I like that call a lot on your end too.
Yeah, and we know he's sleeping better since dealing with the sleep apnea issue over the offseason. My God, my jaw hurts just thinking about it.
Oh, yeah, I know. One other guy, I'm over here feeling tired now. One other guy to mention that's really cheap, and he probably won't have a great lineup spot, but he does get a nice matchup against Trevor May, and that's Logan Morrison, $2,200. I like the Seattle Bats a lot tonight, and if you're just straight punting first base, which I probably won't be doing, there's a lot of good options up at the top. But if you decide you're paying up everywhere else, I mean, $2,200 for a guy who hit his first homer of the year last night. So he's got a little pop in his bat for really cheap, too.
Yeah, and May struggled at the big league level, so I like that call a lot.
All right, moving on here to second base, where I know there's one guy that you like in particular. So why don't you go ahead and give me your favorite play here?
Dustin Pedroia. I am a big PD fan tonight. He gets a lefty. I really like those Red Sox bats against Wei and Chen. So I'm going to get a lot of shares of PD at $3,000. Kanosi obvious play at $3,800 as well. He's going to be super heavily owned, getting Trevor May. So in GPP, he's not going to get a lot of separation from the field there. The other name that I'm looking at, there's really only three names that I'm looking at second base, is Brian Dozier. We obviously touted Paxton, so we like Paxton, but Dozier's only $2,800, and he absolutely hammers left-handed pitching. He's hit cleanup for the most part for the Twins, so I really like Brian Dozier at 2,800, but Petey's going to be my highest owned second baseman. Give me some Dustin Pedroia at $3,000.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, nice way to save some money, get yourself some upside and a fine matchup for him. So I'm still partial towards Cano also. I think it'll be pretty close to a 50-50 split for me with these two guys, both in just such great spots. So I don't blame you either way you go with that one. Elsewhere at second base, Colton Wong's got a little bit of power at 2,800, a lefty against Willie Peralta, who, as we know, gets mashed by lefties, a 261 WOBA. I'm sorry, 361 WOBA allowed last year. So I don't mind him. He's probably going to be batting around 7th, though, so you don't love that spot. But as a nice contrarian play in a tournament, I don't mind him at all. Jimmy Paredes, the flavor of the week, $2,600. If he still has a good lineup spot, I mean, hard to go wrong with a guy who's really cheap and just mashing the ball right now. Justin Masterson, a really good ground ball pitcher, but a guy that gets himself in trouble into big innings, throws a lot of pitches. So, I mean, I don't mind targeting him, but at the same time, I'm with you. I mean, there's a lot of really good guys right around this price. So, good way to be different, but not a guy that I'm going to force into my lineup. So,
definitely.
All right, moving on to third base here, where my favorite option is the second most expensive option on FanDuel, and that's Matt Carpenter. Once again, a lefty against Willie Peralta. And, man, this guy is just phenomenal right now. He's hitting for power now. He's got 3 homers. He has 9 doubles on the season. He gets you plus points. I mean, his worst game in his last 10, he went 1 for 5 and still scored 1 point. But other than that, I mean, 2 hits, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. The guy just puts the ball in play, showing some power. Like I said, Peralta struggles against lefties. I mean, if it's not him, for me, it's going to be Kyle Seager at third base.
I like both names. Carpenter's definitely my top play. You get the park factors of Miller Park as well that play into his favor. I have a lefty behind him that we're going to talk about a little bit later, and another lefty, 2 behind him who we already talked about, Matt Adams. So, I mean, Peralta's struggles with lefties are going to be exacerbated today by that lefty-heavy top of the Cardinals order. I mean, 3 of the first 4 hitters he's going to face are left-handed, so Carpenter's in that catbird seat at the top of the lineup for run scoring, so I really like Carpenter a lot tonight. He's my top play. I agree with Seager. The other name I'm going to throw out there is $3,300 Adrian Beltre against C.J. Wilson. I think he's going to rough up his former teammate a little bit. We know Wilson's skills have eroded against batters over the last couple years, struggled giving up a sizable WOBA to righties last year. So I'm going to get some shares of Adrian Beltre as well.
Yeah, that 345 WOBA last year against righties, pretty enticing. And Beltre got off to a really slow start, starting to get it going over the last couple games. Homer, 4 hits over his last 4 games, couple walks. 4 walks. Even stole a base against Arizona. So you won't be seeing that again anytime soon. But, at the same time, I mean, he's got massive upside at that really cheap price tag in this matchup. So I like that call a lot. Josh Harrison's one other guy I'm going to throw out there at $2,800 against De La Rosa. Pretty bad against lefties and righties. He's been batting at the top of the Pirates order. And he's been getting it done. I mean, his last couple of games, each 2-hit games, 3 doubles over his last 2 games. So cheap way to get some exposure to a bad pitcher.
Yep, and great time to take advantage of Pirates batters because that price tag's held down by their home ballpark. They get to go to a hitter-friendly ballpark, exploit the fact that they are in a more favorable situation tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on here to shortstop, where Troy Tulowitzki is not that hard to afford tonight at $4,700 when your pitcher costs less than $8K. And, I mean, if you're going to be paying up, I prefer somebody we're going to talk about out in the outfield. But if you can pay up in multiple spots, and you really can, I mean, it's not an ideal situation, but it is at home. So $4,700, I mean, maybe he gets it going tonight.
Yeah, I'm honestly thinking that I'm probably going to roll out a couple lineups. I might troll out a couple too, but with McCarthy and get that positional scarcity with Posey and Tulowitzki, and then run some value plays at first base, at second base. I mean, we've highlighted some guys that you can save some money on and get that huge positional advantage with Tulo and Posey, who are far and away the best offensive players at their position tonight. And see what I can do. I mean, there's always value to be had in the outfield. There definitely are a couple outfield names that we like a lot who are on the pricier side who you might have to sacrifice. But, hey, I said I'd get some 20% Paxton out there. get a little 20% Paxton, get me some Posey and some Tulo, maybe a big bat in the outfield. Hey, you've got the makings for a really nice tournament team.
Yeah, absolutely. One other guy I want to mention, and I mistakenly thought that he was a lefty when I was looking earlier on the DraftKings podcast, but I'm just so excited about Cardinals lefties today that I just blindly thought Peralta in there. Either way, $2,500 with some power against Willie Peralta. Yes, he's a ground ball pitcher, but it is Miller Park. I do expect a lot of runners on base. It's going to be tough for him to pitch around, like you mentioned, 3 of the top 4 lefties. So Peralta should be coming up with some guys on base. Got a ton of power, and just $2,500, massive upside for him tonight.
Yeah, he's definitely my preferred shortstop if I'm not paying for Tulo. So I'm right there with you. I really like Peralta tonight. The only other name I'll throw out there is Eric Ibar. I want some guys that hit left-handed against Colby Lewis because, as we know, Colby Lewis, not so good against the lefties.
Yeah.
So anyone for that matter, but...
Yeah. Colby Lewis, 373 Woba to lefties. He was a generous 355 to righties, so not quite as nice to righties, but still pretty god-awful. So moving on here to the outfield. Speaking of Colby Lewis, just so happens to be the best hitter in the game is facing off against Colby Lewis. And since my pitcher is $7,800, I will have a ton of Mike Trout tonight at $5,100. Not hard to fit him into your lineup. Even with, my original lineup I've tentatively made for tonight has McCarthy. It also has Posey, Carpenter, and Mike Trout. So not hard to fit a ton of guys in your lineup tonight. Love Mike Trout in this spot.
Love Mike Trout, and as we talked about before the podcast, you want to bring that average salary down just a little bit. Hook him with his teammate, leadoff hitter Cole Calhoun, left-handed batter, facing off against Colby Lewis. $3,400, folks. That is, I think, your bargain of the day. $3,400 for a guy who's hitting well after finally getting healthy, and he'll be on. And I certainly like guys that get on in front of Mike Trout. Good things tend to happen when that's the case. So I'm going to be hooking the two of those guys together, and I'm going to be rolling out some lineups with that pairing for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of values, another guy that I really like today, and I know you're on board with him as well, $2,900 Jason Hayward. Once again,
yes.
A lefty against Peralta. Sign me up. $2,900. He's finally swinging a better bat. Not a lot of multi-hit games here, actually 0 in his last 10, but he does have 2 homers in his last 5. So, as we know, Peralta just horrible against lefties. I am going to continue to say it. I'm getting a ton of exposure to this guy tonight.
Yup, and I'll go ahead and take the reins from you with this pick. You usually have to make it. I'll do it for you. Corey Dickerson gets a right-handed pitcher at Bakersfield. Enough said.
Yeah, I heard he's pretty good at home against righties. I heard he's pretty good on the road against righties, too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I read that somewhere. I actually read that everywhere. So, yeah, great call there. Best in the league against righties last year. Yes, actually best in the league. Hanley Ramirez has a nice price tag here as well at $3,600. Mashing the ball right now. Homered again last night. 2 hits. The guy's just crushing the ball. And we're going to want to get some exposure here to Wei-Yin Chen, as we know. Not a terrible pitcher, but there's just so much power in this Boston lineup. When you can get a guy with the upside that he possesses at $3,600, it's hard to go wrong.
Yeah, total agreement.
All right, a couple other guys. Gregory Polanco swinging a nice hot bat, scoring some runs, stealing some bases, $3,300. As you noticed, FanDuel's pricing really, really loose tonight. You can fit anyone you want in here. So, take your time with your lineups tonight because it's really not that hard to just make a star-studded, just stacked lineup tonight.
Yeah, this is real fantasy baseball. Like you were putting together, this has got to be what the old school people did with their cards, like lining them up. Like this is my 9. Like here's my players at every position. Like that's what I'm thinking right now. Like it just has that vibe.
Oh yeah, and I did used to do that late '80s, early '90s. You're sitting around there. I used to have like a big poster board with a diamond drawn, and I'm getting my Mike Trout in center field and my Buster Posey behind the plate, and oh yeah, it's exciting times. But yeah, I love things like that. And one more cheap guy I want to mention, then I'll see if you've got anyone else. Alejandro De Aza at $2,500 should be leading off. You and I very disappointed that he got pulled last night with runners on second and third for Steve Pearce. But that's what you'll get. That happens with him. Obviously, Steve Pearce is the lefty specialist, so I understand that if he's not in the lineup. But still, $2,500 today. Hard to go wrong if he's batting leadoff again.
Yeah, and speaking of very cheap leadoff hitters, we talked about him last night. I'll talk about him again today. They don't get any cheaper than $2,200 Seth Smith. Not that you really need to save money anywhere tonight. As we mentioned, the pricing is loose, but you stick in a minimum salary Seth Smith with Brandon McCarthy, and you can pretty much literally do anything you want to on the rest of your roster. I mean, you can get your Trout, you can get your Tulo, and you can get your Posey, and still field and flesh out a very nice lineup without cutting too many corners elsewhere. So, another name to throw in there. And with the loose pricing, I would expect a guy like Smith to actually fly a little bit under the radar, to be a little bit under-owned because you don't need to save money, so people are just going to ignore a guy like that, I believe. Just the things you can do with these lineups when you stick in a guy like that doesn't cost almost anything and really has offensive upside that exceeds that price tag by a wide margin.
Yeah, absolutely. One other guy I want to throw in, Seth Smith's teammate, actually, and that's Austin Jackson. He stole the base each of the last 2 games. I expect a lot of runs scored in Seattle. Those two have been flip-flopping a little bit, first and second in the order, so both those guys should be hitting up high ends. Jackson's got that upside. I mean, if he gets on base, steals second, scores a run, I mean, he's in a good spot tonight, so I like him a lot at 2,300 as well.
Yeah, and I'll give 2 more names. I'm looking at price points. Again, cheap. Mookie Betts and Carlos Gonzalez, both 3,100, both in very favorable lineup spots. Well, Gonzalez has dropped, but very favorable ballpark for him. $3,100. My goodness, you can't get better prices on those guys considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I was mentioning to you before the show, definitely, that I wish there was an elite option at pitching. I mean, I wish there was a Clayton Kershaw on the mound because I would not hesitate to pay top dollar for a guy like him or Felix Hernandez tonight, and you could still load up your bats. But either way, take advantage of some of these discounts tonight. Thank you for hanging out with us here on the FanDuel Punch-Out. Follow us on Twitter at DFCafe. Tons of great content for tonight's slate at dailyfantasycafe.com, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow.